There has never been an accurate count of Latinos in the decennial census of the United States. Going back to the first census that included a Hispanic origin question in 1980, there have been efforts in every single census to uh, undercount the Latino community, despite the fact that there are extreme barriers already that create such an undercount. In 1990, there were efforts, litigation, and legislation to prevent the inclusion of undocumented immigrants in that decennial count. In the 2000 census, our efforts to allow the scientists at the Census Bureau to correct the census data to make up for the undercount were prohibited from going forward. In the 2010 census, there were calls for immigrants to boycott the census. And now in 2020, we have had a political interference by the administration at levels that we have not seen in any of those previous censuses, with efforts to include a citizenship question, now the political interference of the administration of the Department of Commerce and the workings of the Census Bureau that we've seen over the past 6 months. And of course, the multiple disasters of the COVID pandemic, wildfires in states with large Latino populations, including California and Colorado and Oregon and Washington, and other natural disasters such as hurricanes in states including Florida and Texas that also have large Latino populations. So in many respects, the odds are consistently against a census that fully includes all Latinos, which is why NALEO Educational Fund, with hundreds of other Latino and non-Latino organizations, joined together to do everything we could to ensure that every single American resident was counted in the census, including all 60 million Latinos. The census isn't over. We've done all we can now to have people complete their census forms. And we know that given all the barriers that have been faced, the lingering effects of the political interference, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic that have disproportionately affected Latino households and families, that response rates in heavily Latino areas have been far below those of other parts of the country. So the fact that the Census Bureau touts a 99% completion rate of having counted all households is simply one that not only is it hard to believe, it is really not true. The Census Bureau may have touched 99% of the households on its address list, but we have no idea if everybody who lives in those households were included in the census. We have no idea if those census forms are actually complete with all the information that was supposed to be submitted. And we don't even know if that address list that the Census Bureau compiled included all addresses, even households without a US postal mailing address, which is why every single element of the census is important and why this next phase is even more critical for Latinos, the data processing phase. Now is the time for the Census Bureau to be able to fill in the blanks and complete the process by processing the data. The Census Bureau needs to go back and look at all these forms and determine which forms are incomplete, which forms indicated that there were family members for which there was no room to include the information, for which the Census Bureau has to go back and try to obtain information about those individuals. The Census Bureau now has to unduplicate responses that may have been submitted more than once from a single household. All this data processing is absolutely essential, especially for those population groups that are historically undercounted, like Latinos. And the fact that the administration is attempting to reduce the amount of time that the Census Bureau experts say they need to finish the job is further undermining a fair and accurate census. This is why we continue to call on Congress to take up its constitutional responsibility as being the entity that has the responsibility to ensure that a census is carried out every 10 years and extends the statutory deadlines for the delivery of the apportionment data from December 31st to April 31st and the delivery of the redistricting data from April 1 to July 1. This will give the Census Bureau sufficient time to make sure it completes the processing and does what it can to include everybody who was not included in the initial self-response period. So the work isn't over, and at NALEO, we will continue working with our partners to ensure that we do all we can to salvage this foundation of our democracy.